Hello and a very good afternoon to all News 9 viewers. I'm Neha Bhan. We continue to bring you the latest from battleground Israel. In the latest developments, tens of thousands of people in Gaza have been asked to move to the southern part of the Gaza Strip to seek refuge following Israel's evacuation warning. Meanwhile, the Israeli Defense Forces also conducted localized raids in the Gaza Strip. Let's get you the latest right on your screens. First, to speak about the casualties. Both the sides, in fact, have suffered casualties. Here, over 1,300 Israelis have lost their lives, while over 1,900 Palestinians have also lost their lives. Israeli Defense Forces have conducted localized raids in Gaza. Today marks the day 8 of the Israel-Hamas war. Hamas, meanwhile, is telling people to not pay any heed to the evacuation order that has been issued by the Israeli, authorities, the Israeli Defense Forces. Hamas has told people to ignore the evacuation order. Last Saturday is when this war was waged on Israel, an unprovoked war, in fact, there. And to speak about the latest, now Israel-Hamas war today, in fact, is the day 8, and over 3,000 people have lost their lives. Both sides have suffered casualties. Hamas, in the meantime, has told people to not pay any heed to the evacuation order, which has been issued by the Israeli Defense Forces, which have asked people living in Gaza to move to the southern part of the Gaza Strip to seek refuge in order to make sure that they are at least able to save their lives. Well, moving on now, cries of Free Palestine rang out in New York yesterday as thousands of protesters took to the streets to denounce Israeli bombings in the Gaza Strip, calling for an end to Israeli occupation and the liberation of the Palestinian territories. Protesters took up multiple blocks in a city that serves as a crossroads for religions and nationalities spanning the world. The largely youthful protest, which drew demonstrators of all origins, some supporting Palestinian flags, accused Israel of genocide and called for the US to withdraw support for its Middle Eastern ally.
No more money for Israel's crime! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! From the river to the sea! From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free! Palestine will be free! From justice! When do we want it? Now! Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down! From the river to the sea! From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free! Palestine will be free!
بالروح بالدم نفديك يا فلسطين بالروح بالدم نفديك يا فلسطين.
The Israeli-Hamas war has divided the international community. There you can see protests now taking place in New York. It is important to note that New York is home to the largest Jewish population outside of Israel and has been the scene of a series of demonstrations in support of the Palestinian cause, as well as, demonstrations in solidarity with the Israeli victims of the Hamas attacks. Protesters have also popped up college campuses across the United States.
The people of New York stand with the Palestinian people and the people of Gaza, who are suffering right now under immense genocidal violence by the Israeli state. Indiscriminate bombings, the use of chemically prohibited weapons like white phosphorus, a brutal siege and closure of water and electricity on an encaged population of more than 2 million people.
And over again, for the last 75 years, we've been ethnically cleansed, we've been living under genocide and apartheid. And when we finally have the will to fight back those who have been colonizing us for so long, we're called terrorists. and ask to condemn the people who are fighting for our rights. This is decolonization in action. This is a revolution. And if we were in the American Revolution back in the day, you wouldn't have been on Britain's side. You would want to be decolonized.
Not only New York, but hundreds of Pakistanis on Friday also took to the streets in several parts of the country to voice their protest against Israeli siege and relentless bombing on the Gaza Strip, demanding an end to the oppression of the innocent Palestinian people. Responding to the call for a protest by various religious groups, people marched on roads after Friday prayers. They held the Palestinian flag and chanted slogans like saying, "From land to the sea, Palestine will be free," and stand in solidarity with Palestine.
तमाम इस्लामी ममालिक के अंदर जो पाकिस्तान में लूट हो गए हैं, उनकी जमीनें उनसे छीन ली गई। मिस्र जैसी ताकतवर फौज, सूरिया की ताकतवर फौज।
The protesters also burned the Israeli flag to show their anger at the rising deaths of Palestinians in Gaza. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Health Ministry has claimed that 2,269 Palestinians have been killed and 9,814 others have been injured. That's the latest figure that we are getting. That's a claim made by the Palestinian Health Ministry that around 2,269 Palestinians have been killed while over 9,000 have been injured. Now, it is important to note that Pakistan does not have diplomatic ties with Israel and refuses to recognize it as a sovereign country until the state of Palestine is established. Pakistanis cannot visit the Jewish state because their passport states it is valid for all countries of the world except Israel.
हम फ़लस्तीनी मज़लूमों के साथ, मुसलमानों के साथ शाना बशाना खड़े हैं और इसराइल के ख़िलाफ़ और इसराइल की जारियत के ख़िलाफ़, इसराइल की बमबारी के ख़िलाफ़ जो मज़लूम फ़लस्तीनियों पर वो कर रहे हैं, ख़वातीन पर, बच्चों को जो शहीद कर रहे हैं, हम ये पैगाम देने के लिए रोडों पर आए हैं कि तमाम दुनिया के अंदर रहने वाले मुसलमान यक आवाज़ होकर, यक जान होकर अपने फ़लस्तीनी मुसलमानों के लिए आवाज़ उठाएं।
हमारे इमाम साहब ने ख़ास दुआ करवाई है कि फ़लस्तीन के मसले को अल्लाह पाक जल्द से जल्द हल करे और ये जो वहाँ जो कत्ल व गारतगरी लगी हुई है, इसराइल ने जो लहू लहान किया हुआ है मुसलमानों को, ये जल्द से जल्द ख़त्म हो।
Apart from New York and Pakistan, thousands of people gathered in Rome to voice support for Palestine and denounce Israel's recent attacks against Gaza. Protesters in Rome progressed in form of smoke bombs, anti-fascist chants, anti-police chants and Palestinian flags. Their protesters seen progressing in form of smoke bombs.
Alla nostra terra, all'autodeterminazione, a Gerusalemme capitale del nostro Stato. Non possiamo accettare di meno.
Protesters in Rome, they're in fact now seen staging a protest. Anti-fascist chants and anti-police chants also heard. Protesters on the streets of Rome come out in support of the Palestinian people. Various chants and songs sung by the demonstrators were heard, from Bella Ciao to the Free Palestine chants, passing through "We are all anti-fascists." The people in revolt, they write history with Palestine free until the revolt. Smoke bombs were also lit during the protest. Tens of thousands of Muslims also staged a protest in support of the Palestinians across the Middle East. Not only that, pro-Palestinian rallies were also organized in North Africa, where demonstrators gathered in Algeria, Libya and Morocco to show support in favor of Palestine. Protests are being held in various parts of the world to condemn the Israeli action as it intensified its strike on Gaza in retaliation for attacks by Hamas terrorists last Saturday. Even though there has been strong support for Israel from various Western countries and many citizens, the Israeli response has ignited anger in many Arab and Muslim countries. Now, amid the ongoing Israel-Gaza conflict, Israel's directive for over 1 million residents in the northern Gaza Strip to move south within 24 hours in preparation for an expected ground offensive has sparked a strong reaction from Turkey. The Turkish government labelled this move as inhumane and a breach of international law. Notably, Turkey, which has had historical ties with Hamas, is actively engaged in diplomatic efforts aimed at mediating the ongoing crisis. Additionally, the backdrop of this situation includes Turkey's ongoing work to mend its relations with Israel after years of discord.
Bugün cihat en az namaz kadar boynu.
What's happening in Palestine have been happening since 70 years. We didn't hear the voice of any human rights, any children's rights. So we are here to say to the Zionist Israel, stop. This is enough. They are killing people, they are killing children, they are killing women who are civilians and citizens in their homeland. I'm really wondered why people didn't say anything since the past 70 years.
I'm here in Istanbul for a vacation, and I don't feel right to go on holiday during this time. It makes me feel sick.
Thousands of Malaysians also rallied at mosques across the country after Friday prayers in support of Palestine, waving flags and carrying placards, condemning Israel's military action in Gaza, which so far has killed hundreds of civilians in retaliation for last weekend's bloody attack by Hamas terrorists.
Ribuan rakyat Palestin sudah takbir. Allah. Duka Palestin, duka kami.
At least 15,000 people gathered at the National Mosque in Kuala Lumpur, draped in scarves and carrying Palestinian flags as they chanted Free Palestine after Friday prayers. They also rallied against Israel and some protesters burned an Israeli flag as well. Thousands gathered in the Jordanian capital of Amman on Friday for a demonstration in support of Palestinians as the Israeli army carried out deadly round-the-clock bombardment on Gaza in reprisal for a Hamas attack on Saturday. Over 10,000 people massed in central Amman near the Grand Husseini Mosque, responding to calls to protest on social media from Jordan's Muslim Brotherhood as well as several leftist and youth groups. These are the protests that have broken out in various parts of the world against Israel for its action against the Hamas terrorists. But we continue to stress on the fact that every country has the right to defend its territory. Meanwhile, Israeli airstrikes bombarded the Hamas-run Gaza Strip on Saturday morning for the 8th day as more than 1 million Palestinians in northern Gaza faced an Israeli deadline to flee south. Residents in northern Gaza on Friday, 13th of October, received a 24-hour notice from Israel to flee south before an expected ground offensive. According to the United Nations, tens of thousands of Palestinians were estimated to have headed south from northern Gaza following the Israeli order. The statement said that more than 4 lakh Palestinians had been internally displaced due to hostilities prior to the directive. Meanwhile, Hamas has vowed to fight to the last drop of blood and told the residents to not pay any heed to the directive issued by the Israeli Defense Forces. Today marks exactly a week since an unprovoked war was waged on Israel by the Hamas terrorists. And the Israeli airstrikes continue to bombard the Hamas-run Gaza Strip on Saturday morning. Last Saturday is the day around 6:30 a.m. when Hamas launched barrage of rockets towards the Israeli territory, and Israel vowed to teach Hamas a lesson that the coming generations would remember for years to come. In a bid to quell the ongoing hostilities, the Israeli Defense Forces have intensified their strikes on Hamas terror targets within the Gaza Strip. Notably, Nukba terrorist operatives identified as key players in the recent infiltration into Israel were among those targeted in a staging ground. The IDF also conducted wide-scale strikes on operational headquarters used by Hamas, where aerial activities were coordinated. And in a significant development, Murad Abu Murad, who headed the Hamas aerial system, was killed during these strikes. A significant blow to the Hamas terrorists, Hamas terrorists. Their Murad Abu Murad, who headed the Hamas aerial system, has died. He was killed during these strikes. As the situation unfolds, the IDF maintains it is committed to defending Israel against the Hamas terrorist organization. The Israeli Defense Forces have confirmed that they carried out localized raids over the past 24 hours in the Gaza Strip. This came ahead of an anticipated ground offensive in the war-hit region of Gaza. A statement from the IDF stated, over 24 hours, IDF forces carried out localized raids inside the territory of the Gaza Strip to complete the effort to cleanse the area of terrorists and weaponry. Now, during these operations, there was also an effort to locate the missing persons. Now, that is what, in fact, the statement has stated. It is also important to note that Hamas has taken several Israeli forces hostage and is using them to deter Israeli attacks on Gaza. If we also could have the visuals on our screens. Now, despite this, Israeli forces have continued their operations to respond to the Palestinian terrorist organization Hamas. This was yet another attempt made by the Israeli forces to rescue hostages.
بس دبلوماسي معاه اكيد
Do remember that this war was initiated by Hamas, and today marks a week since an unprecedented assault was launched on the people of southern Israel after Hamas fired thousands of rockets into the Israeli territory, sparking an unprovoked conflict. Since then, Israel has launched numerous counter-offensives in Gaza, where many Hamas terrorists have sought shelter. The Hamas terrorists, in fact, have carried out brutal attacks against the people of Israel, sparing not even the youngest children. Social media is flooded with several such images of the brutalities that have been carried out by the Hamas terrorists. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made it clear. He has said that Israel is going to teach the Hamas a lesson that the coming generations are going to remember for years to come, and it will also change the order of the Middle East. That is what Netanyahu has said. Now here, the Israeli, forces have confirmed that they carried out localized raids over the past 24 hours in the Gaza Strip, and this has come ahead of the anticipated ground offensive in the war-hit region of Gaza. It is important to remember that it was not Israel that started this war. It was in fact the Hamas that took several Israeli forces hostages after launching a barrage of rockets into the Israeli territories, and it is now using these hostages to deter Israeli attacks on Gaza. Despite this, Israeli forces have maintained that their operations will continue and they will teach Hamas a befitting lesson. Israeli forces have also continued their operations to respond to the Palestinian terrorist organization. In a significant development, IDF aircraft operating under the intelligence guidance of Shin Bet and Amman successfully targeted and eliminated Ali Kachi, the commander of the Najaba force within the Hamas terrorist organization. Now, Kachi had been a central figure behind a recent terrorist attack in the communities surrounding Gaza. Notably, his history includes an arrest in 2005 following the kidnapping and murder of Israelis, and he was subsequently released as part of the Gilad Shalit deal. Now, these latest details underscore the ongoing dynamics in the Israel-Gaza conflict. Now, that's the significant development, an important development that's coming to light. IDF aircraft, which was operating under the intelligence guidance of Shin Bet, and a man has successfully targeted and eliminated Ali Kachi, the commander of the Najaba force within the Hamas terrorist organization, delivering a significant blow to the Hamas terrorist organization. Israeli infantry made their first raids into the Gaza Strip on Friday since Hamas fighters rampaged through southern Israel, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said a campaign of retaliation had only just begun.
אנחנו הולמים באויבינו בעוצמה חסרת תקדים.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel was, quote, striking at our enemies with unprecedented might on Friday, and emphasized that, quote, this is just the beginning. Israeli infantry made their first raids into the Gaza Strip Friday and vowed to annihilate Hamas after its fighters stormed through towns and villages in southern Israel last week, killing 1,300 Israelis, mainly civilians, and making off with scores of hostages. Netanyahu added, our enemies have only begun paying the price, and I won't detail what is yet to come. So far, troops backed by tanks have mounted raids to attack Palestinian rocket crews and sought information about the location of hostages, according to an Israeli military spokesperson. This follows airstrikes that Gaza authorities say killed nearly 2,000 people. On Friday, Israel gave more than 1 million residents of the northern half of Gaza 24 hours to flee to the south to avoid an onslaught. Hamas vowed to fight to the last drop of blood and told residents to stay.
The situation in Gaza has reached a dangerous new low.
Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned of a disaster if so many people were forced to flee, and said the siege of the enclave should be lifted to let in aid.
We need immediate humanitarian access throughout Gaza so that we can get fuel, food and water to everyone in need. Even wars have rules.
Earlier, a UN spokesperson said it would be impossible for Gazans to obey Israel's relocation order without devastating humanitarian consequences. Israel responded that the UN should condemn Hamas and support Israel's right to self-defense. Tens of thousands are estimated to have fled south in Gaza after the notice to evacuate, the UN said Friday. Gaza authorities said 70 people were killed and 200 were wounded when Israel struck cars and trucks carrying people fleeing. Reuters could not independently verify the reported incident.
Moving on now, as Israel prepares for a possible ground invasion in northern Gaza, its important consequential ally, the US is moving to support the war effort against Hamas. This aid involves the provision of military aid such as interceptors for the Iron Dome system, small diameter bombs and JDAM kits that can convert dumb bombs into smart bombs that can be guided onto targets. The US, in fact, has already moved the USS Gerald R. Ford and its carrier strike group into the region, while also reinforcing its standing fleet of warplanes in West Asia, namely A-10s, F-15s and F-16s. To add to this, a second carrier strike group is reportedly on the way to the eastern Mediterranean. Now, the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower and its accompanying fleet, alongside existing US assets in the region, will reinforce the warning given out by United States President Joe Biden that other nations, namely Iran and Lebanon, should not try and take advantage of the conflict between Israel and Hamas. The expanded military presence in the United States has raised concerns that the conflict between Hamas and Israel will become a wider regional conflict involving the likes of Iran and Lebanon, two countries that support the Hamas terrorist organization. Moving on now, we have an important update on the ongoing conflict in the region by IDF spokesperson Jonathan Conricus, who is providing a situational update on the war against Hamas. Let's hear what he has to say.
And its surroundings to move south and evacuate themselves to this place here, the Gaza River, in order to be safer and in order to not be in an area where we are going to enhance our military operations. We use the words significant military operations. We do this, we advertised our intentions in advance, not because it has any military logic, it doesn't, because we want civilians not to be affected by the war. We didn't put those civilians there. They are not our enemy. We are not trying to kill or injure any civilians. We are fighting against Hamas. That needs to be abundantly clear. We are fighting and targeting Hamas and its military infrastructure. Wherever it is, that's where we target it, and we have targeted around the Gaza Strip and in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. We have seen a significant movement of Palestinian civilians towards the south, and that's all over the news. We have seen people listening to our warning, understanding that they are doing the clever thing, moving out of a dangerous area, and that they are doing the right thing for their family and their own safety. Extremely sad and worrying to see is the fact that Hamas actively undermines and has tried to stop Palestinian civilians from evacuating that area, both via messages and also checkpoints and stops on the ground, according to reports made by international media. That, I think, is the peak of cynicism, the fact that Hamas not only holds civilians as their human shields, not only does Hamas embed itself within the civilian population and tries to use them as a disguise, not only do they hide their infrastructure underneath the civilian infrastructure, not all of those things combined, and also when we ask the civilians to evacuate, Hamas tries to stop it. Hopefully, Palestinians will do that as fast as possible, vacate the area for their own security, and return only when we tell them that it is safe to do so. Around the Gaza Strip, as have been for many days, are Israeli reserve soldiers in formation that are getting ready for the next stage of operations. They are all around the Gaza Strip, in the south, in the center, and in the north, and they are preparing themselves for whatever target they will get, whatever task. As I've said before, our aim is very clear. The end state of this war is that we will dismantle Hamas and its military capabilities and fundamentally change the situation so that Hamas never again has the ability to inflict any damage on Israeli civilians and soldiers. Moving on to the northern front, after a few days that were a little bit quieter, I'd like to focus on an event that happened in the western sector of the border, in this area here. Hezbollah fighters fired an anti-tank missile towards Israeli troops. There was a short battle, and the situation eventually calmed down. Afterwards, Hezbollah sent drones into Israel and also fired surface-to-air missiles against an Israeli aircraft. All of those two attempts were successfully intercepted by the IDF, that the situation on the northern border remains very tense, and we are monitoring the activities of Hezbollah very closely with additional enhanced capabilities in the north, prepared for any eventuality that may happen. As we mark a week after this bloody attack against Israel, I draw faith and strength from the level of unity in Israel and from the level of cohesion and battle readiness of Israeli soldiers. And there's ample evidence of that out on social media and in the regular media, and I think that is very, very important to see. A few issues that have been spoken about in the media that I wish to clarify and emphasize and to make abundantly clear. The Palestinian civilians in Gaza are not our enemies. We don't assess them as such, and we don't target them as such. If they were, obviously the situation in Gaza would be totally different. We are trying to do the right thing. We are trying to evacuate civilians in order to minimize the risk for them, and it is extremely sad and regrettable that so many media outlets are focusing on our actions instead of putting the responsibility on the entity that governs the Gaza Strip, and that is Hamas. They are the ones who initiated this war. They are the ones who targeted our civilians. They are the ones who continue to fire rockets at Israel. And by the way, as Israelis were sitting down and perhaps rising from their Shabbat dinner, sirens sounded in Tel Aviv and in central Israel, and they have been sounding in southern Israel over the entire day. Rockets are still being fired at Israel. So all of this is Hamas is doing. We are responding to the situation. We are trying not to strike civilians or their infrastructure, and I think that should be recognized and respected in the world and not criticized. Last thing, positive developments, and very, very important. We've had high-level visits by various ministers of foreign affairs. On the picture you can see, the top picture, Ursula von der Leyen from the European Commission, of course, Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense from the US, together with our Deputy Chief of Staff, General Baram, and with the Ministry of Defense, and the Federal Minister of Foreign Affairs of Germany. In addition to them, the Italian Foreign Minister, also visited the battle sites, and here you can see additional pictures of the two visits. The point being that European and American leaders are sending a clear message that they stand by Israel, that they understand that this act of atrocity against Israel is not another round of conflict, and that they fully support our right to defend ourselves against these monsters. I think that's monsters are my word, that's not what the minister said, but that is the essence of what we're saying here. And I think that is incredibly, very, very important that the world remembers. We're 1 week after the atrocity. Remember how it started. We will likely evolve into additional significant combat operations. When we do so, remember how this started. Not by our initiative, not by our choice, and definitely not by the targets that we chose to make. All of this is Hamas making. I hope you find this useful. As always, if you have comments, suggestions, if there are things that are of interest and you want us to speak about them, please tell us so. And until then, I wish you all the best.
Moving on now, in Ashkelon, scenes of destruction as rockets from Gaza hit the city, leaving buildings damaged and debris scattered across the streets. In response to the escalating situation, Israel has made strategic decisions, closing the vital Ashkelon port and oil terminal, affecting trade routes. The conflict took a dire turn after a surprise attack by Hamas, resulting in widespread chaos, casualties and kidnappings in various towns. Israel's military swiftly mobilized, launching airstrikes on key sites in Gaza and deploying substantial reinforcements. The situation remains fluid, with concerns growing about the intensifying violence. Israel's port of Ashkelon and its oil terminal have been shut in the wake of the conflict between Israel and Palestinian Islamist group Hamas, shipping and trade. Israel's military has rallied after an initial chaotic scramble to halt the assault and is retaliating with airstrikes on roads, buildings and other sites in Gaza while sending huge reinforcements towards the enclave. Meanwhile, moving on now, Gaza has suffered immense damage with the continuous airstrikes from Israel. This is not the first time Gaza has come under fire from Israel. It has always been a violence-ridden zone. My colleague Kartikeya Sharma tells you more about the battleground which Gaza has always been.
Through the graphic on the screen, I'll tell you what the Gaza is all about. So first of all, the municipality of Gaza was established in 1893. It was part of the Ottoman Empire. That's the first part. Gaza is 230 square miles with a population of about 2.3 million people, densely packed area. Israel took control of Gaza in 1967, post-war. Before that, it was with Egypt. It was governed by Egypt, and the transfer took place after 67 when Israel took it over. Israel controlled Gaza for 38 years and had 21 settlements there. 21 settlements there. Under Oslo Accord, civilians and security authority was passed on to the Palestinian Authority. Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005. 2005 till 2005, Israeli forces were inside Gaza. Israel continues to control the land and the maritime border of Gaza. So it's not as if, there is free movement from Gaza. It's controlled. Israel's withdrawal from Gaza was preceded by Intifada, but that's another story, not for today. I'm talking about 2001. Ariel Sharon was Israel's prime minister then. That's a bit of a history, but important. 9,000 Israeli citizens had to leave Gaza. They were resettled because Israel thought this is too much of forces required to protect them. Now today, Gaza is governed by Hamas and the West Bank by Fatah. Both don't speak to each other. They are breakaway branch of the Palestinian movements. Now this is what I say, the sense of living, to describe it to our viewers. 90% of water of Gaza's sole aquifer is not potable, so they don't have drinking water. They have to get it from outside. So imagine, you live in a place where you have water, but you can't drink it. The vegetables comes from outside. 95% of the Gaza also do not have access to clean water. The electricity comes from outside. So the city is dependent on Israel. 40% of the Gaza's population is less than 15-year-old. So we are talking about the demography. So which means that half of the men are out, and Gaza Strip is roughly 1/4 the size of Delhi. So imagine how densely packed this place is. I am giving you a sense of geography. And Hamas has 25,000 fighters in its military wing, the terrorist organization Hamas, which has led to killing of the innocent. And the Islamist group Al-Quds also has its presence in Gaza. I use the word Islamist because Al-Quds is part of IRGC. But the objectives are Islamist in region. IRGC is an official player in Tehran, directly reporting to the supreme leader. And Al-Quds is the foreign hand of it. Qasem Soleimani was one of its general. Today, a different man takes care of Quds forces. Gaza is surrounded by heavily fortified perimeters. If I am not wrong, there is a 3-kilometer buffer zone, So this was what was breached. This was what was breached. So today's story is ground attack, Gaza. Now when we talk about ground attack Gaza, what is the biggest challenge for Israel for a ground operation of such a scale? That's my question number one. Have civil and military targets in Gaza become one for Israel? That's number two. Associated Press reported that the parliament and ministries are just targets.
Well, that's all we have in this edition of the Bulletin. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great weekend.
ChatGPT. It can generate codes and human